On the 20th of June 2026, a by-election was held in Rivers Southeast, a senatorial district that includes Opobo and Nkoro local government area, the home community of the sitting governor of Rivers State. Governor Siminalayi Fubara did not vote. There is no footage, there is no official statement, and every single party on that ballot, all four of them, belonged to the political machinery of the man who spent 3 years trying to remove him. The official story is that this was democracy working as it should, a peaceful by-election, smoothly conducted, a vacant seat filled. What that story does not tell you is that the result, 47,961 votes for the winner, 1,647 for his closest rival, was never a contest, because the PDP candidate, the APC candidate, the Action Alliance candidate, and the Labour Party candidate are all card-carrying members of the Rainbow Coalition, the political alliance built and commanded by FCT Minister Nyesom Wike. This was not an election, it was a census, a public measurement of how completely one man now controls the political field in Rivers State. And the governor of that state, a man whose hometown falls inside the district where votes were being cast, was nowhere to be found. This investigation is about what his absence actually means, not what the official silence suggests, not what the reconciliation narrative wants you to believe, what the evidence, the documents, the deal terms, the primary results, the coalition arithmetic actually shows. The question this analysis will answer, and will not answer before it has built the full picture, is this: was Fubara's absence a deliberate act of strategic restraint, or is it the visible evidence of a governor who has already been reduced to a caretaker of an office he no longer controls? When a sitting governor cannot show up to vote in his own constituency, it is not a scheduling conflict, it is a declaration of the terms of his political captivity. What you are watching is not a by-election story, it is the architecture of a captured state, and the thread we have just started pulling runs deeper than the result sheet INEC announced on Saturday night. Subscribe now, because the subject of this investigation is counting on you never connecting what we are about to connect. Stay with this. To understand what happened on June 20th, you need to understand how that seat became vacant in the first place and why the timing of this election matters as much as the result. Senator Barry Barinada Mpigi, who represented Rivers Southeast, died on the 19th of February 2026 in the United Kingdom after a prolonged illness. He had chaired the Senate Committee on Works in the 10th Assembly. He was from Koroma in Thai local government area in the heart of Ogoniland, and he was, until his final days, a loyal and public ally of Nyesom Wike, a man Wike himself described as someone who showed up at his house early one morning during the political crisis and told him, "Master, no matter the situation, I will never leave you." That loyalty defined how his seat would be filled. Wike announced a 500 million naira Rainbow Coalition support fund from Pigi's family in April, and by June, the coalition had fielded its preferred candidate, Olaka Nwogu, in the by-election to fill the vacancy Mpigi left behind. What INEC then cleared was this: 4 parties, 4 candidates, 1 coalition. The PDP, APC, Action Alliance, and Labour Party all participated. All 4 are members of the Rainbow Coalition. Coalition leaders had already publicly stated that in this by-election, as in previous state elections, they would field candidates across multiple parties and deliver the result as a coalition group. That statement was made openly before the election. It was not a leak, it was a declaration. Here is the historical parallel that illuminates the pattern. When Governor Rotimi Amaechi lost control of PDP's Rivers structure to President Jonathan's federal machine in 2014, his response was to decamp, restructure, and fight through a different lane. He was loud, confrontational, and operationally active. He did not go silent. Fubara has gone silent, and silence in Rivers State politics has never once meant safety. The structural concealment this trigger event has activated is not about who won the Senate seat. It is about the completion of something that began in 2023, the systematic occupation of every viable political institution in Rivers State until the concept of party competition itself has become meaningless. The by-election did not reveal Wike's strength. It announced the end of the process of building it.
Start with the law, because the law is where this story's most important ambiguity lives. The Nigerian Constitution grants a sitting governor a 4-year term, renewable once. No provision exists within that framework for a third party to negotiate away a governor's right to seek renewal. The right is personal, constitutional, and non-transferable. What exists outside the Constitution, in the space where presidential patronage and the threat of impeachment operate, is a different kind of law entirely. It is the law of political survival. In June 2025, closed-door meetings were held at the presidential villa in Abuja. Multiple credible sources, including reports published by the cable, indicated that the terms negotiated included a critical condition. Fubara would serve out his current term but would not contest the 2027 governorship election. In exchange, impeachment proceedings against him by the State Assembly faction loyal to Wike would be dropped, and Wike would receive effective control over the nomination of all 23 local government chairmen in Rivers. Read that again carefully. The grassroots political machinery of Rivers State, 23 council chairmen, the foundational architecture of any state-level electoral campaign, was handed to the man running the FCT in Abuja. That deal, if it holds, is not a peace agreement. It is a constitutional workaround engineered at the center, designed to neutralize a sitting state governor without the inconvenience of a formal impeachment process. And the by-election result on June 20th is the operational proof that the arrangement is holding. Now, look at who benefits and in what form. Wike has stated publicly at a luncheon for Rainbow Coalition candidates that the coalition will win the 2027 governorship election and remain in power for 8 years. That claim rests on a specific structural advantage. The Rainbow Coalition does not compete between parties. It occupies all parties simultaneously. It controls the APC and PDP leadership in Rivers simultaneously. It nominates candidates across both platforms, and it deploys its resources to ensure that whoever wins any given election is already a coalition member before the polls open. The APC House of Representatives primaries earlier this year demonstrated this in practice. 4 aspirants believed to be loyal to Fubara, including 3 sitting members of the House of Representatives, were disqualified before the primary even ran. The remaining candidates were predominantly aligned with Wike. The coalition swept the exercise. A state party machine that disqualifies the sitting governor's allies from its own primary is not a party that governor controls. It is a party he is trapped inside. Now, track the 2027 calculation embedded in Fubara's absence from the by-election. He withdrew from the APC governorship primary on May 20th, 12 days before the by-election. His stated reason was peace, stability, and unity. The political reality is that by May 2026, every formal party structure through which he could have organized opposition to Wike's candidate had been closed to him. He could not field a credible APC candidate. He could not field a credible PDP candidate. He had no presence in Action Alliance. He had no presence in the Labour Party formation active in Rivers. To enter the by-election fight with no viable candidate, no party structure, and no formal endorsement from any coalition partner would have produced a result even more humiliating than 1,647 votes. His absence was not a protest, it was a recognition that the battlefield had been removed from under him. Now, look at the regional and ethnic dimension, because it is being deliberately kept out of the official conversation. Rivers Southeast includes Andoni and Opobo, riverine communities with a long documented history of feeling politically marginalized by upland-dominated governance in the state. Fubara, from the Ijaw-Opobo axis, was seen by many in those communities as a restoration of riverine representation at the highest level of state power. His absence from a vote in that zone, his people, will not be read as strategic caution by community members in Opobo town. It will be read as a signal about who holds power over their political future. That signal has already been sent. It cannot be unsent.
The simplified movement, Fubara's grassroots political structure, which once mobilized his supporters visibly and loudly during the crisis years, issued no statement on the by-election. Victor Okojombo, one of Fubara's most prominent allies, who has publicly declared his own governorship interest, made no visible intervention in the senatorial race. That silence is not neutrality. It is a managed retreat by a political network that has assessed the battlefield and chosen not to spend resources on a fight it calculates it cannot win.
Now, follow the money to the specific mechanism that made all of this possible. All 4 by-election candidates were members of a single coalition that had publicly pre-selected its preferred candidate before election day. The financial and organizational resources required to run a meaningful political campaign in Rivers State, candidate mobilization, polling unit agents, logistics, community outreach across 7 local government areas, now flow exclusively through Wike's network. Fubara does not control that tap, and without it, any candidate he might have supported would have entered the race structurally outgunned before a single ballot was printed. One name appears across every significant party primary result, every successful by-election, every local government nomination, and every disqualification of a Fubara-aligned aspirant in Rivers State since 2025. That name is Nyesom Wike. The mechanism by which he has achieved simultaneous control of both the APC and PDP, the 2 dominant parties in the state, will be resolved fully before this analysis closes. But understand what it means structurally. When a political actor controls not just one party, but every lane on the field on which parties compete, elections cease to be contests between alternatives and become rituals of ratification. But here is what almost nobody has connected yet, and it changes the entire picture. The pattern being consolidated in Rivers has a constitutional dimension that goes far beyond Port Harcourt. Nigeria's 1999 Constitution, Section 5, vests executive authority in each state solely in the governor of that state. It does not contemplate a scenario in which a serving federal minister operating from Abuja controls the party structures, local government chairmen, state assembly majority, and National Assembly delegations of a state simultaneously, while the constitutionally mandated governor of that state cannot organize a competitive candidate for a single by-election. There is no constitutional provision for what is currently operating in Rivers. What exists instead is a governance arrangement built on the combination of a completed state of emergency, a deal brokered at the presidency, and financial dominance so complete that opposition candidacy has become economically irrational. If that arrangement holds through 2027 and the June 20th by-election suggests it is holding, it establishes a precedent with national implications. It demonstrates that a federal minister with sufficient proximity to the presidency can, over the course of 3 years, effectively govern a state through proxy, while the constitutionally mandated governor of that state retains the title, the official residence, and the constitutional ceremonies, but not the power. For ordinary Rivers people, the economic consequence is direct. The state of emergency that ran from March to September 2025 produced 6 months of sole administration by Vice Admiral Ibok Ite Ibas. Ibas left office without providing a public financial account of what was spent during that period, despite calls from civil society and stakeholders for a report. That gap in the fiscal record is not administrative carelessness, it is the financial cost of political capture, an unaccounted period in a state that processes billions of naira in monthly federation account allocations and generates significant oil revenue. Capital investment decisions in the oil services sector, contractor payments on infrastructure projects, and budget implementation schedules were all disrupted. Those disruptions have not been publicly reconciled. There is a security dimension that is even less discussed. The 7 local government areas of Rivers Southeast, Kana, Gokana, Tai, Eleme, Andoni, Uyigbo, and Opobo overlap significantly with communities in the Ogoni axis where resource conflict, pipeline agitation, and a history of non-state actor organization run deep.
When legitimate political representation in those communities is settled through a coalition selection process in Abuja rather than competitive electoral engagement in Port Harcourt, the civic space that representative democracy is supposed to occupy becomes ungoverned. And ungoverned civic space in the Niger Delta has a well-documented history of being filled by actors who offer alternative structures of authority. A captured democracy does not only fail its voters, it generates the conditions under which that failure becomes someone else's recruitment pitch. Now, the mechanism fully resolved, the Rainbow Coalition. What Wike has built is not a cross-party alliance in the conventional sense, where parties with distinct memberships agree to cooperate on a specific candidate. What the Rainbow Coalition represents is the simultaneous occupation of both dominant party structures by a single political network. The APC leadership in Rivers is controlled by coalition members. The PDP leadership in Rivers is controlled by coalition members. The 23 local government chairmen are coalition nominees. The state assembly majority is coalition aligned. The majority of National Assembly seats from the state are held by coalition members. This means that the institutional mechanisms through which political opposition would ordinarily be organized, party primaries, local government mobilization, legislative oversight, are all controlled by the same network. The by-election made this visible in its simplest form, and a result sheet where every candidate belongs to the same organization is not evidence of popular consensus, it is evidence that the category of opposition has been structurally eliminated. Here is the data point that complicates that conclusion, and this analysis names it plainly. Credible reporting indicates that Fubara retains significant personal financial resources and that his supporters, especially in riverine communities, remain emotionally committed to him. He has been meeting with external allies, Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State, Labour Party's Governor Alex Otti of Abia State, and those meetings have produced signals of support within the Progressive Governors Forum and beyond. What looks like political collapse from the outside may, on one reading, be a deliberate withholding of resources for a final 2027 sprint. The reason that reading does not override the structural argument is this: financial resources and grassroots loyalty are necessary conditions for a political comeback, but they are not sufficient ones when your opponent controls the institutions that determine who appears on the ballot and validates the result. Wike does not need to defeat Fubara at the ballot box if he controls the party machinery that decides who gets a ticket to stand on. When a federal system allows a minister to functionally govern a state by controlling all its party structures without invoking the emergency powers of Section 305 a second time, what is being revealed is not a constitutional crisis, it is a constitutional condition, the formal architecture of federalism within the informal architecture of presidential patronage, where the two have never genuinely been separated.
The strongest case for Fubara's defenders is worth taking seriously because it is not a weak case. The argument runs like this. Contesting the Rainbow Coalition in the Rivers Southeast by-election with no viable party structure, no coalition support, and no federal backing would have been political suicide, not strategy. The result would have been the same 47,961 to nothing humiliation, but with Fubara's name visibly attached to the losing side. By staying home, he denied Wike the spectacle of a public rout, preserved what financial capital he still holds, and avoided the kind of definitive defeat that closes political doors permanently. Moreover, he has consistently resisted calls from supporters to abandon APC and contest the governorship on a third-party platform, which suggests a man running a longer calculation rather than a man who has given up. That argument has merit. It cannot be dismissed. Here is where it breaks down. Political capital is not a savings account. It does not grow through inactivity. Every election in which Fubara's network is visibly absent and Wike's is visibly dominant registers in the political economy of the state as a diminishment of Fubara's operational relevance. The count of his public absences now runs as follows. The August 2025 local government elections, where he was reportedly abroad, His return to Government House in September 2025 delayed by a day that his supporters spent waiting outside in the heat. The APC governorship primary in May 2026, which he withdrew from, and now the Rivers Southeast by-election in his home district, where he did not vote. Each of those absences was explained at the time as a form of strategy. Cumulatively, they form the portrait of a governor being progressively excluded from the mechanisms of political power in his own state. Now, the honest concession this analysis owes the record. The Wike Rainbow Coalition controls the structures, but it does not yet control the 2027 election result. Voter sentiment in Ogoni communities and riverine LGAs is not the same thing as party machinery. In a genuinely contested election, one in which Fubara enters with a viable party platform, national APC backing, and a mobilized, simplified movement, the structural advantage of the Rainbow Coalition would face its first real test at the ballot box, rather than at a primary committee. That test has not yet occurred. The by-election result tells us what happens when there is no opposition. It does not tell us what happens when there is. This analysis maintains its overall argument because the structural obstacle is real and documented. Fubara cannot currently access a party platform through which to run. The APC blocked his allies from its primary. The PDP structure is coalition-controlled. Without a platform that the Electoral Act and party constitutions will recognize, financial resources and community loyalty cannot be converted into a candidacy. And without a candidacy, there is no ballot box test to run. The key misconception most Nigerians carry about this story is that Wike Fubara's reconciliation announcements of late 2025 resolved something substantive. They resolved nothing structural. Both camps told the press they had reconciled in the interest of Rivers State, but the by-election demonstrated that the institutional arrangements that produced Fubara's political containment, coalition control of both parties, local government chairmen, state assembly majority, remained fully intact after every announced reconciliation. You can reconcile with a person and still maintain every mechanism designed to limit their power. That is not contradiction. That is management. Here is where you need to take a position. Either Fubara's absence from the Rivers Southeast by-election was deliberate strategic patience, a governor holding his fire, preserving resources, and waiting for the right moment before the 2027 contest, or it was the visible evidence of a governor who has already been structurally reduced to a caretaker of an office whose political content has been removed. Both readings are defensible. Both have evidence. Tell me in the comments which version of this you believe and what specifically you are basing that on. And if you think this level of analysis should reach Nigerians who are watching the headlines tonight without any of this structural picture, hit the like button. That signal tells the algorithm that Nigerians are demanding the full story, not just the result sheet.
3 scenarios are now in play. They are grounded in what the key actors have demonstrated they are willing to do, not in speculation. The first, Fubara contests the governorship either through APC or a third party. If he stays in APC and secures the ticket, which would require the national party leadership to override the state structure, a move that needs explicit presidential authorization, Wike's coalition places its preferred candidate in PDP. Kingsley Chinda, the House of Representatives minority leader and a Wike ally who represents Obio Akpo, has been consistently mentioned as the PDP vehicle. Alabo Dakurinama George Kelly, backed by the coalition and already in possession of APC nomination forms, runs on the APC side if Fubara does not take it. In that configuration, Fubara would face a two-front challenge from a single network operating across both parties simultaneously, the precise architecture the June 20th by-election just demonstrated at senatorial scale. The second, Fubara moves to a third party,
the Labour Party, the ADC, or the NDC, running on the strength of riverine bloc support and national APC sympathy, calculating that in a fragmented result across 3 candidates, his coalition of Ijaw, Ogoni, and reform-oriented urban voters can produce a plurality. This is his highest risk option. It requires the Labour Party structure, represented at the gubernatorial level by Governor Alex Otti in Abia, to open its platform credibly to a Rivers campaign. It requires INEC processes to run without structural interference, and it requires Fubara to believe that federal goodwill from Tinubu's APC will survive his departure from the APC. None of those conditions is currently guaranteed. The third, and the most consequential for the people of Rivers State, Fubara exits the race entirely. He negotiates the preservation of his personal political and financial interests, throws what remains of his network behind a candidate of his choosing within the coalition framework, and leaves the 2027 governorship to the Rainbow Coalition's preferred candidate. It produces the outcome Wike has already publicly declared: 8 years of coalition governance. It means that a governor elected in 2023 on the promise of representing the riverine communities that had long felt marginalized will have served 1 term in which the last 2 years were defined by institutional constraint and exited without mounting a credible defense of the office he held. The specific signals to watch between now and the party primaries tell you which of these 3 paths is actually being taken. Watch whether Fubara reconstitutes the simplified movement before the end of 2026, active recruitment, public events, grassroots mobilization. An organized simplified movement is the infrastructural signal for a real contest. A dormant one is the signal for managed exit. Watch whether INEC clears multiple governorship candidates from outside the Rainbow Coalition network in any upcoming party primary processes. Coalition control of party structures means that candidate clearance at the primary level is the decisive gate, not the general election. Watch whether the national APC publicly and formally extends the standard first-term governor's right of first refusal to Fubara, or whether the Rivers APC primary is allowed to proceed with coalition candidates running unopposed as the House of Representatives primaries ran in May. And what Fubara's own public calendar? A governor preparing a re-election campaign generates a visible public footprint, engagements across the state, constituency visits, infrastructure commissioning, policy announcements tied to electoral messaging. A governor managing an exit generates a different footprint, meetings in Abuja, quiet stakeholder consultations, and a governor's office that issues statements about reconciliation rather than governance.
Now to the question that opened this investigation. Was Fubara's absence from the Rivers Southeast by-election strategic restraint or evidence of a governor who has already been reduced to a caretaker? Here is what 3 years of evidence, the state of emergency, the assembly crisis, the Supreme Court ruling on the 4-man legislative gang, the LGA elections, the APC primary disqualifications, the Rainbow Coalition's public declarations, and the by-election result has built toward. Fubara is the sitting governor. He retains the title, the residence, and the constitutional ceremonies. But the institutions through which executive authority translates into operational political power, the party structures, the legislature, the local government network, the federal patronage chain, are not in his hands. They are in the hands of a man sitting in Abuja who announced to his coalition members that the 2027 governorship is, in his words, already gone, and who then proved it 4 days ago with a result sheet that showed 47,961 votes and no meaningful opposition in a district that includes the town where the sitting governor was born. His absence from that election was not resistance. It was the evidence of what has already been built around him. In 5 years, if this trajectory holds, Rivers State will not be ungoverned. The roads will be announced, the budgets will be presented, the elections will be conducted.
but the state will have completed a transformation from Nigeria's most contested political battleground into its most efficiently captured one. A state where every party on every ballot belongs to the same network is a state where accountability to citizens has been structurally removed, not abolished, but routed through a single gatekeeper whose authority derives not from Rivers people, but from proximity to the presidency in Abuja. The people of Kana, Gokana, Tai, Andoni, Oyigbo, Eleme, and Opobo will continue to vote. The question is whether what they are doing when they queue at those polling units still constitutes a choice. Leave that with me in the comments. Not a moral judgment, your read on where this goes. You now know something specific that the average Nigerian watching the evening news tonight does not know. They saw a by-election result. They saw a number, 47,961, and a name, Olaka Nwogu, PDP, Rivers Southeast. What they did not see is that every party on that ballot was a member of the same coalition, that the sitting governor did not vote in his own home district, that the deal terms reported from the presidential villa in 2025 include a clause that would make Fubara constitutionally entitled to a second term but politically prohibited from pursuing it, that the party primary machinery that would validate any candidate's right to run was disqualifying Fubara's allies in the same month this by-election was being organized. You have that picture now. The Nigerian watching tonight does not. If you know someone trying to make sense of what is happening in Rivers, a colleague, a family member, someone following the headlines without the structural map underneath them, getting this analysis to them is not a favor to this channel. It is the only way that picture reaches them. The thread this investigation opened but did not resolve. Olaka Nwogu, now a senator, he ran on the PDP ticket, but the Rainbow Coalition provided every significant vote he received across every party that contested the election. When Nwogu takes his seat in Abuja, whose instructions does he carry? And what does his first vote on the Senate floor tell us about whether what was elected on June 20th was a senator for Rivers Southeast or a senator for the Rainbow Coalition? That is the next investigation. This is NAIJA Unmasked. The mask comes off. I will see you in the next one.